I just replayed The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, a game that, when I was younger, at the age of 6, was able to beat within a day, and I would beat it day in, day out. That was pretty much all I did. I would play Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. And I started playing it because my sister, Christy, played the game, and I thought the game looked mystical and wonderful and really cool. And I wanted to be more like my siblings and find a way to connect with them. Maybe I just liked the animations that Link did. Maybe I thought the combat was cool. I'm not exactly sure why younger me adored the game so, but he did. And I knew everything about the game. I knew all the answers to all of the puzzles. I knew how the combat worked, how to fight every monster, how to do every puzzle, every voice line, or not voice line, every text line, I suppose. Every nook and cranny, little secret you could find in that game, I found, and I would do it like every day for a long period of time. I would just do that. And even when I started to die down and I wouldn't just play solely The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, I would still play it, and when I did, I would do essentially everything. At least the main story. I would do all the temples. Just because I had mastery over the game, such as that. And that was a long time ago, and I haven't played the game in a while, pretty much since then. For context, if I was 6 at that time, and maybe I played the game once when I was 9 or something, then I'm 16 now. So it's been a long time. And yet, going back and replaying it, I still remember a lot of things about it, and a lot of the puzzles and the answers to them. It's not as if I can, recite the exact layout of the fire temple or the water temple to you here, though I think I could do that just because I spent enough time in them. It's more like whenever I entered a room, I would remember the layout and then remember, oh, that's what this room is. This has these things, it has these hidden secrets. I'm going to go and do them now. And I would do that for almost every room in the game. There were, I think, 2 instances where I didn't know what to do. And just because I was stumped. One was in the spirit temple at the end. There's this in the main room where there's the big statue, like the meditating lady statue, that you eventually blow the face up to get into the boss of the spirit temple. In there, when you come back as adult Link, there's this rusty switch that you have to hit to get a key to open up. Or to open up a door, I don't remember exactly what it was. But it was some sort of lock, and you couldn't walk over to it. Now, on the other side, it had the same layout, and you managed to get over to that platform, because you could play this song called the Scarecrow Song. And the Scarecrow guy would show up, and you could hook shot onto him from over there. And so that's how you get over there. But on the other side, even though it was the same, you can't get across this gap to get to the rusty switch because the Scarecrow guy won't show up there. And so I was stumped for a long time. I backtracked through the entire temple, used the lens of truth. I used to look up stuff all the time if I didn't know what the answer was. But this run, I did not look anything at, which led to a lot of cool moments, also some bad moments, which I'll get to eventually. But I just did not know how to get across this gap. I was probably stuck there for like half an hour to maybe 40 minutes. But then eventually I was just looking through my inventory and I realized, oh, I have the hover boots, the thing that, lets me cross gaps because I can walk on air. And that, in fact, was the right answer. And the rest of the temple was pretty easy, pretty much a breeze after that. That moment was just a haha moment. Oh, I should have known I had to, to cross the gap with my cross gap item. That would have been useful to remember. There was that moment, and also at the bottom of the well where you get the lens of truth as Child Link. That place took me probably 2 to 3 hours this time around. Definitely the longest I spent in any area, other than maybe the overworld. But sorry, the water just ran down through the piping, and since I'm I'm under the stairs in my house, so that way, in this little Harry Potter-esque room, as in where he lived with his uncle and aunt, and so that way I can have better sound quality. And I heard pipes, and the water was going through the pipe, and so it knocked off my train of thought. But the bottom of the well, that thing that temple mini dungeon, I suppose, has a lot of hidden things, a lot of good, a lot of bad. And like so the way the map of that map is laid out is it's just a big square room. Um and like it's a big square room with the center of the room being blocked off by walls. And so there are these four hallways that are the sides of the square, and you can't go in the center of it because there are walls blocking it off. But what you eventually realize is that you actually can go in the center because the walls are fake and you can just walk through them. They're just textures. They don't have any solid geometry on them. And the way you figure that out is, one, just by rubbing up against geometry, um, or two, you get the lens of truth, and then you turn it on and you're like, oh, hey, there's this whole area of the mini dungeon that I didn't know about. And so what I thought I had to do was, since I ended up going into the middle room early, I actually didn't remember the bottom of the well very well, so I got to experience that for pretty much the first time, despite my extensive knowledge of the game. But I went through, and there essentially there was a very, not a straightforward path, but there was a hidden little thing that's very hard for you to see that you have to find. And by going through there, you get the lens of truth and in essence beat the mini dungeon. But I didn't find this little hole that you had to crawl into. And so I didn't find it at all. It was in an area I had already searched, but I didn't search well enough to find it. It wasn't behind a wall, you can just see it. So I just missed it somehow while going through things. And so what I ended up doing was rubbing up against all of the geometry to look for secret walls. And I found a lot of secret walls. And I went probably everywhere in the dungeon except for that one spot I had to check out. And so if you're fast, you could beat the dungeon in like 5-10 minutes, really quickly. But since I wasn't familiar with the layout and I ended up walking around and doing all this other stuff that didn't matter, then trying out weird, obscure ideas with ocarina songs and the Song of Time, and trying to find all these hidden walls. It took me a very long time to actually find the right way to go. And I was very annoyed at that section, but also it was it was another haha moment because, oh, if only I had looked at this. I was dumb, and I went around and checked every nook and cranny to find the right spot. But if you were smart and you searched correctly and you used your brain somewhat, then you could find the spot and you could just finish it really quickly. And so that spot was the longest I spent on an area in Ocarina of Time, but also it was somewhat fun having that aha moment. For me, it was more like the aha moment, like it was right there all along. I didn't have to be looking for all this stuff. So that was very unenjoyable experience, but the game was not. The game, a lot of things surprised me while I was playing it. Not story-wise, but mostly gameplay-wise, because the gameplay of the game actually isn't that good for me. The combat is pretty linear per enemy. All of the enemies are like these little puzzles, but a lot of it requires waiting for the enemy to do a thing first, and then you can play it. Until late game, where you just get cool items like the arrows of light, where you can just shoot enemies and then hit them afterwards because they're stunned. But until then, there's a lot of waiting in the combat, especially when fighting the Stalfos. You just sort of Z-target onto it and then circle around it, or maybe find a good like a lot of the one-on-one combat scenarios, there's a lot of waiting. The two that come to mind are the Stalfos and the Gerudo hideout woman, who you can fight when you're trying to rescue the Carpenters. And the Stalfos, you just sort of circle each other, and you cannot hit the Stalfos first. You can, but the game makes it very hard for you to do that, and if you whiff your attack, then the Stalfos will punish you by hitting you. And so then you just miss. And so you have to wait for that. You have to wait for him to do a thing first, and then you just block it and jump attack. Or just attack him, or do whatever you're going to do after that moment. And there's a lot of waiting. It takes like 4 or 5 hits to kill them. Maybe 3 if you do, 3 or 4 if you do jump attacks, because those do twice as much damage. But essentially the fight boils down to wait, wait, wait. Sometimes it's really quick, and I'll be like, attack, oh, shield it, hit him. And in those moments, it feels really good against the Stalfos. But sometimes the AI just will not attack you first for maybe a minute. Maybe 30 seconds to a minute per attack. And so then you just like have these fights that go on for way too long because the guy won't attack you. Okay, a minute's probably overshooting it. Maybe 30 seconds, 15 to 30 seconds is probably more where it is. But per single combat encounter, and they often pair Stalfos in two, then it becomes really annoying. There are also these lizard guys that go, eh, 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 eh. Those guys, those ones are a bit better because you can hit them and then they sort of are forced to do something. There isn't a lot of waiting. You can do the waiting thing you do with the Stalfos, but you can also just attack them because they aren't going to shield your stuff. And so they are more fun to fight because it just lets you play the game rather than waiting for the game to be able to be played. The most fun fight I had in the game, other than the thematic fun of the final Ganon fight, not the first two phases, but the third phase with the lighting and you lose the Master Sword, and then there's the dramatic music with the drums going on, and you just know that this is it. This is where stuff gets real. That was really thematically fun. But the most gameplay fun I had with the combat was fighting the Iron Knuckles. Because you can hit them, and they don't wait. They aren't like, they're at these dumb things that you can hit them with. But they just have super armor, which for those that don't know, it means that you don't flinch when you get hit on the first phase of their fights. And so you get up and you attack one, and then they just like armor through it and hit you with their big axe. And so you have to like weave in. You can't shield anything, so you have to actually use the movement in the game to dodge the things. Maybe weave in and hit it, and then try to run away, or bait it into doing an attack and then hit it. Maybe you could try using bombs or something from far away. There are many ways to tackle fighting the Iron Knuckles, and they are the most gameplay fun I had in the game because of that freedom. Now, you could also be a lame-o and just put on Nehru's Love, and then, oh, I don't take any damage, so then I just hit it, take the hit, and then go up and hit it and take the hit, and that's boring. If you do it that way, it's boring, but you don't have to. You can have fun while fighting it. So, combat-wise, the game was... I talked about the things that I made it sound somewhat fun, but a lot of it is waiting and arduous, especially with the smaller enemies, the big Skeletala. You have to like just wait like 10 seconds per every big Skeletala. And in the Forest Temple, and in a lot of temples, Shadow Temples specifically, Forest and Shadow, there are Skeletalas that just drop from the ceiling in between rooms, in room transitions. So that's like a 10-second wait to fight one per room, because it comes down, you have to wait for it to turn itself around, unless you have like the hook shot, which you get fairly early, but still, that's also something you don't know. If you shoot the hook shot at it, it just stuns it, and then you can kill it, or you can just walk past it, really. I tended to walk past them, but I didn't know you could use the hook shot on it until way late in the game, till, I think it was the the Shadow Temple, that I figured out that you could do that. Maybe you could also shoot it, but, I mean, the way that the game sort of hints at you killing it, when you use Navi to check the little blurb that the game has on every enemy, it's like, oh, it has a soft spot on its back, wait for it to turn. And so, oh, okay, you learn to fight them by waiting, and then it turns its back, and then you hit it. And if you don't jump attack it, it doesn't kill it in one hit, unless you have the bigger on-sword. And as a child, I don't even think jump attack kills it in one hit. Or maybe it does. Maybe as a child, jump attack kills it in one hit, and as an adult, the Master Sword kills it in one hit, because the Master Sword doubles your damage, and jump attack doubles your attack damage, and so it just stacks like that. I'm not sure. But regardless, you have to wait a little bit every time. And when it's in transitions of rooms, that means every time I die and go back to the beginning, or I want to go back to the beginning because I missed a key, or I die in this section, and I have to restart the section, and oh, there's a big Skeletala that's going to make me wait like 5 to 10 seconds, and that adds up. There's some text in the game you just can't skip past. There are unskippable cutscenes. I'm okay with the cutscenes in Ocarina of Time, because they tend to be pretty short when they're unskippable. Except like story sections. You can't really skip story dialogue, which I was fine with because I got invested into the story, as I usually do with Zelda games. Not as much during this one. I suppose. I don't really know what my main thesis of this is. I just wanted to talk about my experience playing Ocarina of Time and what I thought. But to get back to the gameplay, I want to talk about the temples and how a lot of Zelda games, their temples are either really, they start off strong and then end weak, or they start off weak and end up strong, or they have like dips and turns through specific temples, you know? But when I played Ocarina of Time, I can safely say, other than Ganon's castle, I suppose, that was actually a pretty low point for me, but then it had the really good boss fight, and so it brings it back up. And also, it's like a kind of dungeon, not really. It's more of a test of everything you've learned so far. It's not a linear, crafted experience of puzzle solving, combat, and atmosphere. But all of the temples in Ocarina of Time are really good. The child ones, Deku Tree is really slow, but also it's the I can give that to the game because it was expected that this was one of the first 3D games you've ever played, and so you have to get used to the controls, moving in a 3D environment, used to the game feel, all of that, and so it has to be slow. Tonga's Cavern was relatively quick. I mean, you can beat it really quickly if you just know where to go, which I did remember where to go, and so I did all this stuff. I'm not sure how you're supposed to figure out how to drop the bombs on the big shark or the big dolphin's eyes. Maybe there's a sign? I don't remember. I just know that because of when I played it, you drop the bombs there, but that's a weird puzzle. Jabu Jabu, definitely the best of the three. I love the music and the weird sounds of it. The beat is really staggered. Like, it's still in just 4/4, like, but the beat is like boop, ba boop, ba ba. So it's sort of like a heartbeat, but like a weird, wacky, non-human heartbeat. And there are all these weird, kind of gross sounds that go on while you're inside it. And it's all this pink, fleshy, inside, gooey, jabu jabu stuff. It's super weird. Super cool, though. And I really liked the atmosphere of the whole thing. Feels different than any other temple in the game because of its weird, its odd mechanics that it doesn't bring back at all. They're really just in that temple. A lot of the temples don't reuse things that often. I mean, obviously there are things you reuse, and there's a hook shot thing you go on to, or there's a bomb you have to blow up, and you have to find the wall. You have to find the fake wall to blow up. Those are used, but they're all used in different ways, and they're done to different effects. And so it doesn't really feel like the game ever treads the same ground twice. Or if it does, which I can't think of any moments in particular, but if it does, it ups the ante. Oh no, actually I can't think of one. In the Forest Temple at the beginning, there's this big there's a big wall you have to climb up, and there are 3 small Skeletals, these small spiders on it, and you have to climb up these vines, and while you're on the vines you can't attack, and so while you walk up, all these small Skeletals on the thing will look at you, and then they'll get mad and attack you and hit you off, and so you have to either have really good movement, which I don't know if you could do that, or kill 2 or 3 of them to get up. But it's just, the vines are stationary, they're stationary, okay. But then way later in the game, in the Spirit Temple, there's this section where it's similar, you have to climb up a wall and there are Skeletals on it, but the wall has different moving pieces to it. There are you have the long shot now, so you could actually, like I did, you can just skip the whole section if you're smart, and just long shot to the top of it, and then you don't even have to worry about it. There are the the spinning eye sentry guys, I don't remember what they're called. They're shooting at you, so you have to kill them beforehand, or just be really quick. The Skeletals are harder to hit because the wall is sectioned off into different parts, and they move around. And so when you're climbing up the wall, you have to time your climbing so that way you can you can go up on the correct parts. So it's similar. It's like, things are attacking you and you have to climb up the wall, but now you have more items to deal with it, more ways to go about doing it, and it's harder. And so that would be... That's really the only thing I can think of off the top of my head. I guess you bomb stuff in the bottom of the well, and you also bomb stuff in the Fire Temple, but you're not even required to do it in the bottom of the well, so It doesn't matter. The temples are very consistent. The puzzles are never that hard, as in, the puzzle never takes too long to figure out or that much lateral thinking. You can be a very linear thinker, such as I, and really do everything easily. Maybe there are some puzzles that are like, oh, how was I? Zelda focuses less on the puzzle solving process and more on building up to that aha moment where you just realize it just strikes you, oh, that's what I'm supposed to do, and then everything makes sense. Like when I found that one spot and I thought, aha, or when I used the hover boots and I'm like, oh, that's what I was supposed to do. And it's obvious in retrospect. In hindsight, it's easy to tell what the logic makes sense. But in the moment, it's obscured, so it's harder to figure out. But that aha moment is what really the puzzles lead to. And so the temples are enjoyable for me as something to play, but not really something to think about. The main enjoyment I got from the temples was their individual atmospheres and learning the layout of the temple. And so I know where everything is and how everything goes. Specifically the water temple, which I remembered not liking when I was younger, but maybe that's only because the water temple had a bad reputation. Like, oh, this is the temple that Miyamoto apologized for making, so it's got to be a bad temple. But playing it this time, there was a lot of waiting in the temple, but Ocarina of Time in general has a lot of waiting around doing nothing anyway, and so it didn't bother me that there was more of it in the temple with the iron boots and sinking down. I thought it would bother me more than it did because I really don't like waiting. And there are some times when you have to wait in the game where I wouldn't let the game get away with it, and I criticize it for it. But the Water Temple, maybe it's because I like the music and the color, the color design and the atmosphere, and the structural design of the temple so much that I didn't care that I was waiting because I was still getting to experience it. The Water Temple is all about movement, or not movement. It's about learning well, I guess every temple in the game, actually, barring the Shadow Temple. That one's more of a linear path. Every temple in the game is about learning the layout, going into the temple, which every room is like a mini temple. It's like a mini version of what the whole temple is. You go into the temple, you don't know what you're doing, you don't know what the new enemies do, you don't know how all of that works. But then as you go through, you start to gain a sense of understanding. And you start to maybe not getting hit by that keys every time it comes to hit you. You learn how to fight the new enemies. You learn the new layouts. You understand what the new dungeon item you get does. And so slowly, as you go through the temple, you gain mastery over it. And that's where the enjoyment comes in for me. It's not the puzzle solving, because I actually find the puzzles to be very non-interesting, as in the solution is never far from the question. Sometimes with keys it's difficult because you miss one and then you have to go back and find it because they put it in a weird spot. But also that's on you for not exploring the temple through its every crevice and understanding it. You have not mastered the temple yet, so you are not granted passage to the next area through way of keys. And nowhere I felt that more than the Water Temple. I think the Water Temple, for the gameplay and for understanding the layout, as in mastery over the temple, is my favorite. But I would have to default my favorite temple, maybe not default, but after some thinking, my favorite temple is the Forest Temple because of its atmosphere and music. And that is, I believe, my favorite part of Ocarina of Time as a game. It's not the gameplay, it's not the story, which I think the story isn't really a story, or it is one, but it's a very by-the-book story. That's a harsh way of putting it, because I don't think the story does anything bad or wrong, or even not good. I enjoy the story, but the story is more there to lend the fantasy of being a hero, of being a classic hero to you. And by what I mean by classic hero is that you are the paragon of good and courage. You even have the Triforce of courage, on you, so that would make sense. You go and you save the princess, you save the girl, you fight the big evil, you kill them, and you do that by exploring the lands and helping the people, so you can prepare yourself to defeat the major evil. And Ocarina of Time is the best execution of the classic hero story I have ever played. Or that I think I have ever played. Other stories add their own twists to it, and so I wouldn't call them classic hero stories. Other stories have different themes and different narratives and different ideas going on, but Ocarina of Time is just a straightforward coming of age hero. And through the game's atmosphere and music, the music of which Koji Kondo composed, all of the tracks really bring to life the world and brings to life the color palette and the characters and their quirks and all the little details in the different places. And Ocarina of Time allows you to play out the role of being the classic hero. And I don't think another game has ever done that for me and really made me want, or really made me feel so immersed and enveloped in that world. I'm not sure if I'm really getting across what I mean. Everything in Ocarina of Time for me on its own is good, but as a whole, Ocarina of Time brings together something more than the sum of its parts is greater, or the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. I don't know. You know what I mean. I don't know the exact saying. The game, it gets attached to you, and you think about it, and everything in it, like the temples, like how you gain mastery over them, you gain mastery over the game. And you love being in it. You play Ocarina of Time because the game makes you love it, and you love being in it. Because it's Ocarina of Time. And not because it was... the game is heralded as one of the greatest games of all time. Not because it has a lot of amazing reviews. But the game is good because it makes you feel good while playing it.